Okay, it looks like we are live streaming from both YouTube and Facebook. I am so excited for this transition. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for joining Exchange with Ariane today. If you are familiar with my platform, I bring people together in safe spaces for real conversations. And now we are bringing it virtually. So today we're talking about Black emotional intelligence, and we are going to highlight self-awareness and what that means to be Black in America. So today we are joined by our special guest, clinical psychologist, hairstylist, and research scientist, Dr. Afiya. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Inviting me. I'm so excited to be on this platform and to have this conversation with you, someone who gets emotions. So this is very exciting for me.
Yes, I've been, watching you from afar, and I love your work and what you're passionate about. So I'm glad to have you here.
Thanks. I feel special.
Yes. So you very much are. So, when we talk about Black emotions and emotional intelligence, we can come through this from so many different angles. But there is a particular place that I want to start, and that's with the question of why is exploring how it feels to be Black in America so important? Why is that so important?
It's so important to explore the Black emotional experience because it guides our daily behaviors. There's a big relationship between our feelings and our behaviors and even our thoughts, right? And so to some degree, if we can better understand and value our emotional experiences, that can drive us towards certain healthy approaches to resolving conflicts, to taking care of ourselves, to being in relationships, all these different things that we have to negotiate on a daily basis.
Yeah, and when you're talking about like navigating our emotions, placing infinite emphasis on the Black racial piece and what that is like is kind of, makes it a little different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Of course, Black is a race, but there's also cultural components to being Black, right? In terms of the rules of how we express emotions and what certain emotions mean. Yeah, Blackness gives context for that emotional experience and how other people will interpret our emotions.
Yeah.
It has its own language of its own, because let me just talk about Africa for a second. In a lot of traditional African societies and languages, there isn't a word for all the emotions. Like they might actually describe, like, my head is hot or my eyes are cold. Like it will describe these physical responses that govern how to interact with other people and paying attention to your body. So there's cultural aspects, but yeah, Black and emotion, it's complex.
Yes, it is. It is so complex. And then when you're talking about expressing it and naming it, it is so different depending on your culture, and what that looks like. And for those of you who you guys don't know this, but I would have the delightful permission to read some of Dr. Afiya's work, okay? And I was so excited to have the opportunity to read, some of your writing from the past. And what I and what I learned from you is that we learn how to navigate our emotions through the stories of our adolescence. And then those stories are kind of directly connected to how we identify within our Black experience. So can you talk more about that relationship between your adolescent memories? Because you said adolescence, so I'm sure there's a reason why.
Yeah, well, adolescence is so critical in identity development, period. It's during this time that we begin to ask ourselves, who am I? Of course, we navigate that from childhood, but adolescence is when we actually have answers for it. And beyond just our social role, like a daughter or a friend, but really getting to the layers that we are as a person. And so since adolescence is such an important time to negotiating these questions of who am I, it also then adds a layer to that identity when we think about what it means to be Black, right? Because not only are you a person, but you're a Black person.
Mhm.
And within the context of the United States, which everything becomes racialized because that's, you know, the way the system is organized. It's a race-based system that
Right.
access to education, employment, housing, right? Everything you can relate to a race-related topic in U.S. politics.
Exactly.
And so adolescence then is a time that not only am I a person, but I'm a Black person, and thinking about how our experiences are unique compared to other racial and ethnic groups. And so it's during this time that a lot of us have a certain level of independence, maybe going to the mall by ourselves or, you know, hanging out with friends in public spaces. And during those times, then we discover how authority figures react to us, or being approached by the police, or maybe being treated differently by security guards, or being followed in the store, or things that we've probably all experienced, but navigating, did they do that because I was Black?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of coming to conclusion, is this something that was race related or not? If I was white, would I have the same experience? Probably not. And so I think it's during that adolescence time from 12 to 21, because adolescence can be pretty broad.
Yeah.
But that's when we really are in this path of self-discovery. But in that path of self-discovery, we have to factor in race and Blackness.
Okay. Right. Let me see. I'm getting notification that it's not on Facebook, but let me see if it's on YouTube. Let me see. Sorry, guys. This is my first time doing this. So we're going to see if it is streaming. And I don't know if I could necessarily do it myself. Let's see. Let's see. Hold on. It says it's on Facebook. You are live. I got YouTube. It says you are live on both platforms.
Hi, Danella.
Oh, okay. See? You are seeing folks. All right. So that means we're here and we're good to go. All right. Awesome. So yeah, just picking up back to, you know, your emphasis on your adolescent years. I thought I had to think deeply about that because, you know, I'm thinking about the self-exploration piece, like you were saying, and then how the adolescent period is so long. And when I thought about it, like I chose to focus on like my younger adolescent years. So the two memories that came up to me, one was when I was in 8th grade and I had an encounter with a substitute teacher who let out the class after a quiz to go to the restroom. And I'm in the bathroom and I'm washing my hands and I hear, "Where did that little Black girl go?" In front of my entire class, right? So I'm like in the bathroom, like, and there's other girls in the bathroom with me that also went to wash their hands and use the restroom. So I'm like, okay, why did I get called out? Especially as the little Black girl. But me being who I am, you know, my little sass, I come out and I said, this little Black girl has a name and my name is Ariane. Okay. And I heard an uproar from my classmates who were predominantly white saying, "You don't talk to her like that." Oh, you know, it was like you heard a screech from the classroom, like a shock, like, oh, no, you know, and I had to like really deeply kind of reflect on my feelings, like, oh, maybe that's where the safety I feel around white people who are my peers. I've never really felt unsafe around my peers who were white, probably because of some of those impactful memories that you say are so important. You know, I kind of like correlate, analyze myself, you know, and started thinking about that. And then another memory would be my connection with my family. And like you talked about the culture within Blackness, I'm come from a Caribbean family and a Caribbean background. So most of my most fun, joyful moments have been surrounded by a lot of people. So I connected that to some of the joy that I may feel around groups. you know, and not feeling, you know, nervous around certain groups.
Okay, you did a really great self-assessment. Of your narratives are very inclusive, right? In terms of not only your peers, but family, and how that has shaped your concepts of Blackness, right? These very self-defining moments that you could go back and revisit over and over and almost see it play out like a movie. Because I saw you start moving your neck and everything.
Yeah.
And like,
right.
so even with those stories, it really speaks to your collective identity, in terms of how you feel connected to Black people, but also how you feel connected to anti-racist white people, right? I know that term is pretty new. I know there was no term anti-racist when I was growing up, but it sounds like they had a level of understanding that what the teacher said was offensive, should not be said. But I feel like that's a unique story, but still you in a pretty socially conscious space with their classmates that they're able to advocate for you.
And I didn't even know, honestly, I didn't put the two together as far as like that safety piece or that rallying until reading your work. And I was like, oh, maybe that's why I'm not so scared, or, you know, maybe that's why I can have these certain conversations, you know, because right now, like you were talking about, you know, those experience maybe with police going to the mall by yourself or certain things like that, you know, those create fearful narratives.
Yeah. In my master's thesis, which I didn't send to you, it was actually on earliest memories of race. That was a whole theme and concept. And the emotion that was the most frequent was fear. The first time you can ever think about a racial experience is a lot of people reported fear. And the fear oftentimes came from observing the person's parents and how they were reacting to certain things, whether they had been pulled over or that they got in trouble at school, and this sort of fear that was associated with it. So I definitely want to make sure that, you know, Black people are not a monolith, right? There's a range of experiences, especially a range of emotions, but there tends to be some patterns related to fear and anger as well. Anger was the most frequently represented emotion for those adolescent memories, just being so angry about experiences that they had.
Yeah, and like that, even, you know, you acknowledging the fear and the anger, how do you see that playing out with the, I guess, the negotiation of the emotions piece? Like, if you have these experiences embedded in anger and fear, or the parallels between Black people, what does that look like for how we negotiate our feelings, I guess?
Yeah, well, I think fear and anger are both painful. That you know, when you feel really angry, it's a retaliatory emotion, right? In terms of you're reacting to that sense of being harmed in some way and trying to get someone or something back, and getting others to feel the way that you felt because they harmed you. Or even fear is anticipating more pain in the future, right? It's that the anxiety, the fear, it's a future tense experience. So I think with Black people doing some degree of emotional time travel, the present and the future don't feel so good when it comes to experiences of racism. And so I think that that's a factor in terms of negotiating pain in the present tense and in the future tense, and how debilitating that can be. Now, I know there's, you know, the flip of that too. Pride is in there, and happiness. Stories you shared, that there's joy and happiness, but what tends to happen is that the system of racism, white supremacy, basically can dictate certain experiences, but also traits in processing emotional experiences, right? In terms of not really being able to soothe pain that has come. So
yeah. And when you talk about like cultural pride and or cultural racism and racial pride, that's, you know, like two things that kind of stuck out to me as well, in the sense that you kind of said that like Black people have to constantly navigate the two, And I mean, can you just, I know how it blew my mind because I was like, oh crap, like I've been navigating between being super, like even in my story, how I came out the, bathroom, this little Black girl, you know what I mean? Like it was that pride that, yes, I am a Black girl, but my name is. So like, I don't know. Tell me more about like, why was it so important to even include like,
well, that's the thing, that these experiences are complex, that having a racist experience doesn't make people not proud to be Black, that it can almost inspire more investigation and leaning more towards their Blackness, depending on the outcome of the experience. I'm thinking about how I gave a survey once to an introduction to psychology class at Howard University. So, this class of maybe 200 Black students. And I gave a survey, and every single student in the class rated like the highest level of intensity for pride. I'm like, really? All of y'all are proud to be like,
that's why we at Howard.
I'm like, out of 1 to 10 scale, all of y'all said a 10. I'm like, you never at a point where like but I think that's the thing, that we are super proud to be Black, but I think that's almost, can be a protective factor then in negotiating cultural racism. So being very affirmed in your identity can help you get through these racist experiences, right? So it's not a negative thing to be Black. It's not our problem. It's, it's how white people or other people are treating Black people. Not that we're doing something ourselves. It's other people's reactions. So I think that installation of pride comes from racial socialization, because I'm sure you learned it somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And so even for me, I'm like the biggest fan of A Different World.
Mm-hmm.
And that show was very affirming of my racial pride.
Yeah.
Because it probably started when I was like 4 or something.
Yeah.
And I watch it to this day. Like I was watching an episode yesterday, and it's like, yeah, that doesn't have racist experiences. It definitely gives you like something to lean into, but it doesn't erase all the challenges.
Yeah. And that's the big piece that, I feel like Black people have always adapted, and that might just be another example of how we have adapted to the cultural racism, like you said, that we have to face so much. And, I really wanted to bring this conversation up, even as I reflect on memories and those racial narratives, because it's a part of self-awareness. So when you're learning more about who you are in this world, thinking more about those racial narratives will help you better understand how you're navigating, through life. And especially during this time where there has just been a civil unrest, where we've all kind of just been feeling it. So reflecting more about that, I think is really important.
Yeah. Now you have me thinking about the emotional intelligence book. I was trying to listen to some on my Audible today before the conversation. I'm like, oh, I was supposed to have finished it.
Yeah.
The premise is that, people have varying levels of emotional intelligence. People are just born with, high levels of emotional intelligence. But the good thing about emotional intelligence is that it can grow. And I think the ideal time, because of all the racial unrest and the media attention, for Black people in particular to grow their Black emotional intelligence, right? In terms of the theme of today's conversation, that there are skills and strategies that I think we can actively engage in to respond to systems of racism and oppression.
Exactly.
So you have me thinking a lot about this.
Yeah, because like when I was reading the book, I love everything emotional intelligence, because I really feel like when you better understand yourself, you can navigate the world and you can have conversations with other people and show compassion for others and, be more attentive. And I just feel like it just contributes to so many other skills that even the book probably doesn't even hit on, So, but when I read your work, I was like, oh, there's like a whole nother level. I said, oops, I'm skipping stuff. Like I am missing stuff. And especially if I am someone who wants to teach people how to be more emotionally intelligent, how can I skip the racial piece in whoever I'm talking about? Because that is such a big part of who the person is, and I was like, ugh.
Yeah, and I want to be clear that I was building on the work of my graduate school advisor, Dr. Cynthia Winston Proctor. So she developed this theory called race self-complexity, which basically argues that race adds a level to the identity and personality through stories, right? That race can be processed narratively through stories. And so what my role was to extend her research by including emotions, because as we know, emotions are so critical in how we make sense of the world, whether we're paying attention to other people's emotional experiences and following their cues, or whether we're going inward and paying attention to our own. And so that emotions are its own language in itself, and race can be processed through emotions. And that was my contribution from my dissertation 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Now it's all relevant and stuff, but
it's so super relevant. You were like above, you were way beyond your time, because can you publish it? Like I'm ready for the
watching, got a book contract for me. It's ready.
Exactly. And I never had even thought about the concept of race emotions, because I love emotional intelligence and everything that has to do about that, but like when you specifically talk about race emotions, can you just like elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so in terms of race emotion and even race narrative emotion, that these are emotions directly related to experiences of race. And so it's one thing to be angry, but another thing to be angry because of a racist experience. It adds, a different level of processing and comprehension and context. I think some of the popular terms and understanding Black emotions is angry Black woman, right? That's associated that there's so much anger, or even in whiteness, white guilt, right, is a big thing in terms of guilt is even an emotion that's basically knowing what you should do and that you didn't do it. And so I think about that there are race-related emotions that have its own category compared to just like a basic emotional experience. So I actually developed a coding system to capture something called emotional tone of these race stories. And so emotional tone includes the intensity, frequency, and duration of an emotion, right? Because it's one thing to feel angry, but how angry were you? How long did the anger last? How did it sit with you? Because to some degree, each emotion, from my perspective, is like a note. And when we have these race-related experiences, it's like this symphony of notes and sounds that our sense of self. And again, the emotions kind of, are brief and fleeting sometimes, or they can last for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So that's what I mean by race emotion, and even race narrative emotions, the emotions that are in the stories about racial experiences, positive and negative.
Wow. I mean, just even thinking like, the question of how did it impact you the next day, or how long, okay, you experienced this on Wednesday. How did you feel about the situation on Thursday? You just always get my brain going, Dr. Afiya. You really do. I just was always so excited. I'm like, yes, emotions.
Yeah, I did a presentation last summer on memories about grandmothers and hair. Like I do a lot of hair research now. And so someone who attended it, he said, do you know how, he was an old professor, and he said, do you know how I grade student papers? I said, how? He said, based on the discussion that it causes. So you are affirming me so much right now that, people write dissertations and it gets all dusty in some bookcase, right?
Yeah.
The fact that it can still be relevant and lead to this amount of discussion is really motivating me to speak more about it. Because now I'm like, that does make sense. I think I needed a decade to get over the trauma of writing it. But I think you have reinvigorated me to really investigate how complex Black emotional experiences are. So thank you.
You're very welcome. I mean, you're deserving of it. My experience has been in the South. Like, I always try to, put emphasis on that I was raised in Georgia. That my experience is completely different from someone raised in a different state.
Yeah, I'm from New York. So yeah, Georgia and New York are very different places.
Very different. Even Alabama and Georgia, and we're right here, Florida and Georgia. There's just there's like a different type of cultural racism that, is embedded in the state of Georgia that, people who have lived here and are not white, they may have felt in some type of way. And, as we're talking, I also want to talk about self-management, because emotional intelligence talks about two components as contributors to personal competence. So in order to be personally competent, you have to have some level of self-awareness, and you have to learn how to manage your emotions. Now, when I first read this, I wasn't, thinking about from specifically the Black perspective. So I want to read something to you, and I want your thoughts, okay? So in the book, it says that success comes to those who often put their needs on hold and continuously manage their tendencies. Do you need me to read it again?
One more time. That was deep.
Okay. So success comes to those who often put their needs on hold and continuously manage their tendencies.
Yeah, I think that my reaction makes me think about therapy. So, I have a private practice and I see clients, and it makes me think about we need to process and make sense of our emotional experiences before they have a negative impact on our social world. Because I think it's fine to feel any emotion, but to make sense of it and where it comes from and how it should be used and drive you is how you can successfully navigate your social world. Because I'm defining success as being healthy.
That part.
And so, as we know, being healthy is not like, oh, I had an apple today, now I'm good. Right? No, it's the continual process of drinking water, eating apples, getting enough rest, exercising. And I think that happens when it comes to your emotional world too.
Yeah.
So I hope I'm understanding the quote, but it just makes me think about, in order to thrive and be healthy, that we need to process
yes
the world before it brings us any consequences. What do you think that means?
So, I was indifferent about the statement, and I'm looking at it. I hate that you can't see the words. What you are mainly tapping on is the continuously managing your tendencies, right? So your tendencies to be well. So that is drinking water, making sure you're expressing your emotions or tapping into them, and continuously managing that wellness. I didn't really, like you said, what is success and how is that defined? So that was one thing that came up for me. And I didn't, it said comes to those who often put their needs on hold. So I was kind of indifferent about that, especially looking at this from the Black American lens, because I was like, that's the expectation that Black people have to continuously put their needs on hold. I mean, is that what we have to do in order to get success? So I just wanted to kind of have a free form conversation with you about.
Yeah, well, aren't we always putting our needs on hold? And I don't know if that's healthy or not. It makes me think about, the wise mind approach.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of dialectical behavioral therapy, and what's her name, Linehan, where there's the emotional mind and
Mm-hmm.
rational mind, right?
Yes.
And the best place to live is in the wise mind, where there's overlap. So not only to feel and experience the emotion, but giving yourself time to process it. And so I guess I'm leaning into thinking about if we acted on every emotional response we had, that would not be a healthy space.
Yeah.
So even if you're like, ooh, I'm so hungry right now, but if I got up and started eating and walked away and left this interview, would that be good? That wouldn't be good, because I would say, okay, it's going to end at a certain time and then I'll eat dinner. So it kind of speaks to how we shape our needs,
Okay.
almost ranking them, right?
Yeah.
I think it's more important to me to have a conversation where somebody gets this Black emotional experience versus like getting a snack. Does that make sense? Like that if it becomes impulsive, every need.
Yeah.
Especially if we get real Freudian with it, right? If Freud we have drives,
like a little baby,
right? Yeah. I don't know if that would be good to actually behave in a way that would get those needs met all the time. But
right.
So I guess my reaction. How about this? It depends on your theoretical orientation and framework of that quote.
Okay, there you go. That's a good one. That's a real Dr. Afiya answer. Psychologist answer.
We're talking
It depends. I heard that a lot during my master's program, but I really appreciate how you brought that to perspective, because like my racial pride and managing that, the cultural racism piece, I was like, are you coming for me? Like, I didn't really understand the whole picture. That's why I even put it in here, because I was like, Dr. Afiya she's gonna bring it down to some clarity. Yeah.
I hope it clarified.
Yeah, it did.
About meaning making, right? In terms of experiences, words, we are in a constant state of trying to make sense of our world, and our emotions can give us insight and perspective in terms of how we feel, right, about certain experiences. So.
Do you have any, this is just something I just thought about. Do you have any tips for Black people managing their emotions? Because I feel like, the management piece is, kind of hard for just people in general. But I feel like right now there's heightened emotions in little pockets that people may be feeling. So do you have any tips for managing race emotions, I'll put you on the spot.
Well, I think it's important to have a support system. I think that even goes back to the narratives that you shared, that I think those experiences emotionally would look so different if you didn't have your classmates, if you didn't have your family, right? So I'm just thinking about how to find people who can align with your value system and your understanding of race to be able to have an external space to process. Because as you know, emotions need to go someplace, right? Either they're going to stay inside or going to go outside, but how do you direct it? And I think having support groups, right? Maybe we need to do a Black emotional intelligence support group online or something. But even, through talk therapy, right? Talk therapy is an ideal way. And I'm not just saying this as a therapist, right? But an ideal way, because what you don't talk out, you act out, right? That's what one of my supervisors said from grad school, and it always stayed with me. What you don't talk out, you act out. That emotions are still going to be performed in some way, and to be able to verbalize your emotional experiences is actually a way to diffuse it and get your needs met, right? So I'll say that, to have space to process, whether it's with family and friends or hiring a therapist to process and help to make sense of and manage some of your emotional experiences.
Yeah, thank you. That was good. Shameless plugging our profession, but it's great. Sorry. Yes. So, this whole conversation, it seems like Black people in particular are constantly navigating race, self-complexity, and emotions. And that is just, like the narrative that we live in. So, yeah, I don't have any more questions. Do you want to add anything? Is there anything that you just want to get off your chest?
Yeah, well, I'm just again glad to have space to process the experience of studying Black emotional experiences, right? In terms of, I had a client say to me the other day, of course, de-identified, I'm not releasing anybody's information, but she was really talking about, where do Black women go when they need to be emotionally vulnerable?
Yeah.
So it's been sitting with me for this whole week, really thinking about what are the spaces where Black women can go to be emotionally vulnerable. And so I think we need more of those spaces.
Yeah.
And I think that there are wonderful digital spaces, but I'm also thinking there needs to be very private and secluded spaces. My work has led me to the hair salon, right? In
Yeah.
terms of being a place where Black women can be vulnerable, but it shouldn't just be isolated to there. And so I think that that's my charge for people who are watching, and even for you to think about, well, when do Black women in particular get to express their emotions in a way that's affirming and allows them to be emotionally vulnerable? So that's for everyone listening, and for a next conversation we could potentially have.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for propelling that. And you definitely put some nuggets like, oh, maybe, to see what can come in the future for this. Because you're right. It's very important to create those spaces. And if you know that people need it, you kind of are like pushed towards creating certain things. That's our job, to serve others, So hopefully those of you who watched today will leave with a better understanding of who you are. And if not, hopefully we can encourage you to do some more self-reflection. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe on my YouTube channel. You can find me on Instagram at Emotional Exchange. You can find Dr. Afiya on Instagram at Dr._Afiya. And this is only the beginning. So thank you, Dr. Afiya, for joining me for my first emotional exchange virtual experience.
Yes, I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You guys can catch the replay however you see fit on YouTube or Facebook. And yeah, I will see you guys soon. Thank you so much.